The silence inside the pinnacle was a physical thing, a pressure against the eardrum so profound it felt like the moment before a lightning strike. 3 seconds ago, Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil, a man whose quietest whisper could shift global markets, had asked a simple question. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't gestured impatiently. He had simply leaned back in his custom-tailored chair, his gaze sweeping over the panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, and spoken a single, fluid sentence in classical Arabic. Julian Croft, the restaurant's general manager, who wore his ambition like a suit 2 sizes too tight, began to sweat through his $4,000 silk shirt. Chloe, the lead waitress chosen for her polished looks and fabricated resume, flashed a smile as empty and bright as the crystal glass in her hand. The $500 hospitality deal that was meant to be Julian's coronation was evaporating like mist on the 95th floor windows. Then, from the shadows near the service corridor, a voice emerged, quiet but clear. It wasn't the panicked manager. It wasn't the useless waitress. It was Amelia Vance, the girl they called Mia, the one whose primary job was to remain invisible, to erase the smudges and spills left by the wealthy. She answered him. And when the billionaire turned his head, the look in his eyes didn't just halt the conversation. It seemed to bend the very fabric of time around their small, gilded table. The pinnacle wasn't just a restaurant. It was a monument to exclusion, perched atop the city like a glass and steel crown. It served dishes that cost more than Mia's monthly rent for her tiny studio apartment, a cramped space that always smelled faintly of old books and her grandmother's lavender sachets. Mia adjusted the stiff, starched collar of her uniform, a cheap polyester blend that chafed the back of her neck. She was 24, but the exhaustion in her deep blue eyes belonged to someone much older. Someone who had learned too early that life was a series of ledgers where the debits always outweighed the credits. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a severe regulation bun, a style that emphasized the fine, intelligent lines of a face she usually kept angled towards the floor. "Vance, did you polish the silver in the private dining room?" Julian's voice cut through the pre-service hustle, sharp and grating. He didn't need to shout to be heard. His tone carried a unique frequency of condescension that sliced through any noise. Mia didn't look up from the wine glasses she was meticulously polishing, each one held to the light to check for streaks. "Yes, Mr. Croft. Twice. And I checked the table settings." "Don't just check them, anticipate," he snapped, striding over to her station. He was a man of average height who tried to compensate with expensive shoes and an aura of manufactured importance. His thinning hair was gelled into a helmet, and he smelled aggressively of sandalwood and self-satisfaction. Tonight is not just another Tuesday. Sheikh al-Jamil is not just another rich tourist. He is old money, a scholar, a kingmaker. When he sits down, I want him to feel as if the chair was carved from a celestial throne just for him. Is that understood? "Yes, Mr. Croft," Mia murmured, her gaze fixed on the delicate stem of a burgundy glass. "And you," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "You stay in the background. You fetch ice, you clear plates when told, and you do not make eye contact unless a superior speaks to you first. Chloe is handling the primary service. This is a $1 billion deal. If it goes through, I'm looking at a regional directorship. If it fails, well, gravity is a powerful force from this height, and the first thing to be thrown over the edge will be the dead weight." He let the threat hang in the air before turning his attention to Chloe, who was applying a fresh layer of crimson lipstick using the reflection in a silver tray. Chloe was the embodiment of the Pinnacle's ethos, glossy, expensive, and fundamentally hollow. She was tall, with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes, and she was Julian's prize pony. Her actual duties were minimal. She excelled at laughing at bad jokes from wealthy patrons, and then offloading the tedious work of entering orders and refilling water onto junior staff like Mia. "Julian, darling," Chloe purred, blotting her lips on a napkin. "I'm so thrilled. A real sheikh. I spent a month in Morocco last year, you know. I'm practically an expert on their culture. You just have to be deferential and compliment their beautiful calligraphy." From her corner, Mia felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Chloe's trip to Morocco had been a 10-day all-inclusive resort package in Marrakesh, and the only Arabic she knew was shukran, which she pronounced with a Californian accent. "He's not from Morocco, Chloe," Mia said, her voice barely audible. She couldn't help it. The historian in her, the part of her she tried to keep buried, refused to stay silent. "The Al-Jamil family is from the Arabian Peninsula. Their cultural touchstones are completely different. They value poetry, history, subtlety. He's a known traditionalist." The low hum of the kitchen staff's prep work ceased. Chloe turned slowly, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rising in theatrical disbelief. She looked at Mia as if a floor tile had just offered a critique on foreign policy. "Excuse me?" Chloe's laugh was a brittle, unpleasant sound. "Did the bus girl just give me a history lesson? Julian, why is she even allowed to speak?" Julian's face, usually a carefully maintained mask of smug control, contorted with rage. He marched back to Mia, his polished shoes clicking menacingly on the marble floor. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "I told you to be invisible," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "Who do you think you are? You think because you read a few dusty books you can advise us on how to handle a man of his caliber? You're here to wipe things down, Vance. You're a glorified janitor who couldn't handle the real world, so you ended up here." The insult was so close to the truth it stole her breath. She hadn't been able to handle the real world, not after the accident, not after her life as a promising young academic at the University of Chicago, specializing in medieval Islamic history and classical Arabic texts, had shattered in an instant. "I just meant," Mia started, but his grip tightened. "Shut up," he snarled. "You are a nobody. Chloe is the face of this restaurant. You are the grime under its fingernails. Get to the kitchen and help the prep cooks. If I see your face in the main dining room when the sheikh arrives, you're fired. And I'll make sure the reason on your record says theft, so you can't even get a job cleaning toilets." Mia wrenched her arm free, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The threat was real. She couldn't lose this job, not with the monthly bills from the Oakwood Manor care home sitting on her nightstand, a constant, terrifying reminder of her responsibilities. Her grandmother, Eleanor, needed that care. The Alzheimer's was progressing, and the specialized memory unit was astronomically expensive. This soulless, high-altitude purgatory was the only thing keeping Eleanor safe. "Yes, Mr. Croft," she whispered, turning and retreating through the swinging doors into the chaotic heart of the kitchen. The kitchen, for all its noise and heat, felt like a sanctuary. Marco, the executive chef, a burly Italian with a salt and pepper beard and forearms covered in burns and tattoos, was shouting at a line cook about the sear on a scallop. But when he saw Mia's pale face, his expression softened. "Croft being a world-class jackass again?" Marco asked, sliding a small bowl of risotto across the stainless steel prep table towards her. "Here, you look like you haven't eaten in a week." Mia nodded, taking the bowl with a grateful smile. The warmth of it seeped into her cold hands. "He's putting everything on Chloe for the sheikh's visit tonight." Marco let out a loud, derisive snort. "Chloe? That one thinks hummus is an ancient Greek god. If the sheikh orders anything more complicated than a Diet Coke, we're sunk. She'll probably ask him if he wants fries with his tagine. Mia leaned against the counter, eating the creamy risotto slowly. "He won't order tagine," she murmured, her gaze distant. "Al-Jamil is a purist. He's known for testing potential business partners. He won't speak English, at least not at first. He'll use it as a filter to see if they've done their homework, to see if they respect his world enough to meet him there." Marco paused his chopping, a large chef's knife still in his hand. He looked at her, his brow furrowed. "How the hell do you know all this, kid? You're like a walking encyclopedia for rich guys." A shadow crossed Mia's face. "I used to study history, Marco. Before..." She trailed off. She couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't explain that 5 years ago she wasn't Mia the waitress. She was Amelia Vance, a PhD candidate whose thesis on the linguistic evolution of pre-Islamic poetry was already legendary in her department. She couldn't tell him about the phone call on a rainy Tuesday, the one about the black ice and the semi-truck that had orphaned her and made her the sole guardian of her grandmother in a single, brutal moment. She couldn't tell him how she'd traded her dreams of academia for the grim reality of 16-hour shifts to pay for nurses and medication. The world of books and ideas felt like a lifetime ago, a ghost of a person she no longer was. "Well," Marco sighed, resuming his chopping with a heavy rhythm. "You keep that big brain of yours back here tonight. If Croft sees you, he'll probably have a stroke. But keep your ears open. I've got a bad feeling this dinner is going to be a 5-star train wreck." Mia nodded and moved to the dishwashing station to help with the endless racks of plates. She picked up a polishing cloth and began to dry a dessert fork, her reflection warped and distorted in the polished silver. She was a ghost in this machine, unseen, unheard. But tonight she had a premonition that the machine was about to grind to a spectacular halt. At precisely 8 o'clock, the private elevator chimed, its soft tone heralding the arrival. Julian Croft stood at the entrance, flanked by Chloe and another server, all arranged in a rigid formation of forced hospitality. He checked his diamond-studded watch, then smoothed the lapels of his suit for the 20th time. "Remember," Julian whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. "Smile, but don't look eager. Be attentive, but not intrusive. And Chloe, for God's sake, don't mention Morocco." "Relax, Julian," Chloe said, fluffing her hair. "I've got this. I bet he's devastatingly handsome." The elevator doors slid open with a quiet hiss. There were 4 men, all dressed in immaculate dark thobes and fine cashmere bishts edged with subtle gold embroidery. They moved with a silent, coordinated grace that spoke of immense power and discipline. At the center was Sheikh Khalid Al-Jamil. He was older than Maya had expected from his photos, perhaps in his early 40s, with a neatly trimmed beard lightly dusted with silver at the chin. His eyes were the most arresting feature, dark, almond-shaped, and filled with an ancient intelligence that seemed to assess and dismiss everything in a single glance. He did not look at the view. He did not look at the opulent decor. He looked directly at Julian Croft. Julian executed a clumsy, overly deep bow. "Your Excellency, Sheikh Al-Jamil, welcome, welcome to the pinnacle. We are deeply honored by your presence." The Sheikh did not respond. He simply stood there, an island of stillness in the fawning energy projected by Julian. He turned to the man on his right, a formidable figure with a stern face who was clearly his head of security, and murmured something in a low, resonant voice. The language was Arabic, but the dialect was formal, almost poetic. The head of security, whose name was Tariq, looked at Julian with an impassive expression. His Excellency wishes to know if you are the man responsible for the integrity of this establishment. Julian puffed out his chest. I am. Julian Croft, General Manager. And I can assure you, our integrity is second to none. The Sheikh said something else, his eyes still on Julian. Tariq translated. He asks then why your menu, which you sent to his office, claims to offer authentic global cuisine when the lamb is sourced from New Zealand and the spices from a commercial supplier in New Jersey. Julian's smile froze. Ah, well, authenticity is it's a concept. We source the finest ingredients globally to create an authentic experience. The Sheikh's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something, disappointment perhaps, passed through his eyes. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and began to walk towards the private dining room. Julian, flustered but relieved, scurried ahead to pull out the chair at the head of the table. Chloe, Julian hissed as the men were seated. Go. Menus. Charm. Chloe glided towards the table, her professional smile firmly in place. She distributed the heavy, leather-bound menus. Good evening, gentlemen, she purred, her voice a low, sultry imitation of what she thought sounded sophisticated. My name is Chloe, and it will be my distinct pleasure to guide you through your culinary journey this evening. The Sheikh opened the menu, glanced at it for no more than 2 seconds, and then closed it with a soft thud. He pushed it gently away. He looked up at Chloe, his dark eyes locking onto hers, and spoke. It was the sentence that had silenced the room. Aina ru hada al-makan? Chloe's smile remained fixed, but a wild panic flared in her eyes. She glanced helplessly at Julian. I'm so sorry, Your Excellency, she stammered with a nervous giggle. It's just, your language is so beautiful. Could you possibly repeat that? The Sheikh's expression did not change. He did not switch to English. He repeated the question, slower this time, his voice like velvet over steel. Aina ru hada al-makan? Where is the soul of this place? Chloe's hands began to tremble. She looked at Julian, her eyes wide with desperation. I think he wants to know where the restroom is. Julian rushed to the table. Is there a problem, Your Excellency? The Sheikh ignored him. He gestured towards Chloe with a look of profound weariness and spoke to Tariq. Tariq translated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. His Excellency is disappointed. He asks why you would present him with a server who is clearly unprepared. He asks if this is the level of detail and respect his investment would be afforded. He asked a philosophical question about the restaurant's character, and your expert offered him directions to the lavatory. Julian swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. My apologies. A misunderstanding. Chloe is one of our best. She's just a bit starstruck. Nerves, you understand. The Sheikh leaned back in his chair, the fine wool of his bisht settling around him. The atmosphere in the room had gone from tense to glacial. The other 3 men in his entourage, who had been politely observing the decor, now fixed their gazes on Julian and Chloe. It felt like being watched by a tribunal of silent judges. Nerves, the Sheikh said, and the room jolted as he spoke in flawless, Oxford-accented English. The sound was more shocking than his silence had been. Or incompetence. I have built my entire enterprise on one principle, Mr. Croft: attention to detail. If you cannot master the details of a simple dinner greeting, how can you possibly be trusted to manage the intricate details of a $50 million renovation and rebranding? He switched back to Arabic instantly, his gaze pinning Chloe to the spot. Qasidat Antarat bin Shaddad, Hal Tarifainaha, the Ode of Antara ibn Shaddad. Do you know it? Chloe just stared, her mouth slightly agape. The name meant nothing to her. She looked as if he had asked her to recite the tax code of ancient Sumeria. "Kifaya," the sheikh said softly. "Enough." He placed his hands on the table as if to stand. "You waste my time. You insult my intelligence with this performance. You claim to have a soul, but you have provided nothing but an empty, beautiful vessel. We are leaving." Julian saw his entire future crumbling. His promotion, his escape from his debts, his very identity. He needed a miracle. "Please, Your Excellency, one moment. A misunderstanding. Allow me to rectify it." He grabbed Chloe's arm, his grip far from gentle, and practically dragged her towards the kitchen doors, his face a mask of incandescent fury. Julian shoved Chloe through the swinging doors with such force that she stumbled into a cart of dirty dishes, sending a clatter of porcelain and silver echoing through the kitchen. "You useless, lying fraud!" Julian shrieked, his voice cracking with panic and rage. His face was a mottled, unhealthy red. "You told me you knew their culture. You said you went to Morocco." "I didn't know he was going to be a walking history professor," Chloe sobbed, black mascara beginning to streak down her cheeks. "They're usually just rich guys who want to talk about their cars. He's doing this on purpose to be difficult. I don't care if he asked you to build a pyramid on the table. You were supposed to handle it," Julian roared. "Fix it. Go back out there. Apologize. Tell him you were confused. Do something." "I can't," Chloe wailed, sinking onto a prep stool. "He looks right through me. It's like being cross-examined by a ghost. I can't face him again." The entire kitchen staff had frozen. Marco stood with a ladle, suspended over a pot of simmering stock. The dishwashers had turned off the high-pressure sprayers. Everyone was watching the spectacular implosion of their manager. Mia stood in the corner, polishing a silver tray, her back to the drama. But she had heard everything. She had heard the sheikh's question through the door. "Aina ruh hada al-makan?" Where is the soul of this place? It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, a lament, and then the Ode of Antara, a pre-Islamic warrior poet, a man born a slave who rose through the power of his words and his sword. It was a test of depth. "Mr. Croft," Mia said, her voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence. "Not now, Vance," Julian screamed, spinning on her. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of a Category 5 disaster?" "I can help," Mia said, stepping forward. She placed the polished tray on a counter. Her voice was steady, a stark contrast to the hysteria in the room. Julian stared at her, as if she had grown a second head. "You, the floor polisher, what are you going to do? Go out there and offer to dust his shoes?" "I understand him," Mia said, her voice firmer now. "I know what he was asking, and I know the poem he referenced. He's not testing your menu. He's testing your substance. If you send Chloe back out there, or if you go out there and offer him a free bottle of champagne, he will walk out that door, and you will never see him again. He will see it as the final confirmation that this place is exactly what he suspects, a hollow shell." Julian froze. He looked from Chloe's tear-stained face to Mia's calm, determined one. For the first time, he seemed to actually see her, not as a piece of furniture, but as a person. "How?" he whispered, the fury draining out of him, replaced by a sliver of desperate hope. "How do you know that?" "Because I speak Arabic," Mia said simply, classical and several modern dialects. He's speaking Fusha, the formal, literary language. He's testing you on a level you aren't equipped to understand. He's looking for a poet, and you keep sending him a talking mannequin." Julian stared at her, his mind racing. He looked at her frayed uniform, the slight smudge of dust on her cheek, her severe hair. She was the opposite of everything the pinnacle was supposed to represent. And yet, "You!" he scoffed, though the word lacked its usual venom. "Look at you. You look like a scullery maid." "Then give me a clean jacket," Mia said, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "Let me go out there and answer his question, or lose the deal. It's your choice, Mr. Croft. You have less than a minute before his patience runs out completely." Julian looked toward the kitchen door. He could hear the faint, ominous sound of a chair scraping against the floor. The sheikh was making good on his threat. "Marco!" Julian barked, his voice raw with desperation. "Get her a clean jacket, now! Vance, fix your hair, wash your face, and if you make me look like a fool—" "You're already a fool, Mr. Croft," Mia said, her voice low and sharp. "I'm just trying to make sure you don't become a bankrupt one." She walked past him towards Marco, who was already holding out a crisp, new server's jacket. She quickly stripped off her worn, ill-fitting one and slipped on the clean jacket. It was a man's cut, slightly too broad in the shoulders, but it was pristine. She undid her bun, letting her hair fall to her shoulders, and quickly retied it into a simple, elegant ponytail. She splashed water on her face at the prep sink and dried it with a clean towel. "If you humiliate me, I will ruin you," Julian hissed as she walked towards the door. "You can't ruin what's already broken," Mia whispered back. "Now get out of my way." She pushed past him and approached the swinging doors. She took a single deep breath. She wasn't Mia the bus girl anymore. She was Amelia Vance, the scholar. She was the woman who had once debated the nuances of 8th century Bedouin poetry with the world's leading experts. She pushed the doors open and stepped into the frozen tableau of the dining room. The sheikh was on his feet, his entourage rising with him. They were leaving. Mia did not run or scurry. She walked with a calm, measured pace, her posture straight, her head held high. She stopped 10 feet from the table. She didn't look at Julian, who was hovering by the doorway like a nervous ghost. She looked directly into the eyes of Sheikh Khalid al-Jamil. She inclined her head in a gesture of respect, not a bow of servitude, but a nod of scholarly acknowledgement. "Assalamu alaikum, ya sahib al-sumu," she said. Her voice was clear, the pronunciation flawless, the cadence melodic. "A'tadhir an al-ta'khir, kan al-matbakh yuhadir, shayan yastahiku maqamikum." "Peace be upon you, Your Highness. I apologize for the delay. The kitchen was preparing something worthy of your station." The entire room seemed to hold its collective breath. Sheikh Khalid, who had been turning to leave, stopped. He turned back slowly, his dark eyes narrowing as they fixed on Mia. He took in the slightly too large jacket, the simple hairstyle, the lack of makeup. And then he met her gaze. He saw no fear, no artifice. He saw intelligence. Slowly, deliberately, he sat back down. "Wa alaikum as-salam," the sheikh replied, his voice a low, curious rumble. He gestured for his men to be seated as well. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his full attention now on her. "Man, auntie? Who are you?" "Ismi Amelia," she replied, maintaining eye contact. "Wa ana huna liakdimak." "My name is Amelia, and I am here to serve you." A ghost of a smile touched the sheikh's lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a grandmaster in chess who has just seen his opponent make an unexpected, intriguing move. "Jayid," he said. "Good. Sanara ma'ida kunti haqiqatan, ya Amelia, am mujarad khadiyat, ukhra min mudrik al-ahmak." "Let us see if you are real, Amelia, or just another trick from your foolish manager." He lifted the crystal water glass in front of him, holding it up to the light so that it fractured the room into 1,000 glittering pieces. He switched to English, his voice, now carrying a charge of theatricality for the benefit of the entire silent restaurant. "Translate this for your boss," the sheikh commanded. "Tell him I have a riddle for you, Amelia. If you solve it, I stay. I sign the deal. If you fail, I will buy this building, fire every last one of you, and convert this floor into a private gymnasium for my falcons." Julian, cowering by the wall, looked as though he might actually faint. Mia didn't even glance at him. Her focus was entirely on the sheikh. "Ana musta'ida, ya sahib al-sumu." "I'm ready, Your Highness." "The riddle is not on the menu," the sheikh said, switching back to the rich, complex Arabic he had used before. Speaking faster now, weaving in classical allusions, deliberately testing the limits of her fluency. "I do not want the food of bankers and stock traders. I want the food of poets and scholars. I want a dish that tastes of the Umayyad court in Damascus, a time when the greatest currency was knowledge, not oil. I want a memory of a city of jasmine and libraries. Can your kitchen produce such a thing? Or does it only know how to char flesh for the new barbarians?" Mia listened, not just to the words, but to the soul behind them. He wasn't asking for a specific recipe. He was asking for a story on a plate. He was asking for an understanding of history, of a golden age he felt the world had forgotten. He wanted something complex, layered, fragrant, and intellectual. He was testing for a kindred spirit. She turned to face Julian, her expression calm and unreadable. "Well," Julian hissed, his voice a desperate croak. "What does he want? The most expensive thing we have? Lobster? Caviar? Tell me." Mia looked at her boss, the man who had called her a nobody, and for the first time she felt a sliver of pity for his profound, cavernous ignorance. "He wants a memory, Julian," she said. "He wants a dish called shish barak. It's lamb dumplings, cooked in a warm yogurt sauce with cilantro and garlic, and drizzled with pine nuts toasted in butter. It's a dish of scholars, a dish of poets. It's a taste of old Damascus." Julian looked horrified. "Dumplings? In yogurt sauce? That sounds like peasant food. This is a Michelin star contender. Tell him we have a seared foie gras with a fig reduction that will change his life." "If you serve him foie gras now, Julian," Mia said, her voice dropping to a deadly serious whisper, "he will not just leave. He will make it his personal mission to destroy this company. You cannot answer a line of poetry with a balance sheet." She turned back to the sheikh and gave a slight, confident nod. "Naam, ya sahib al-sumu, afhamu tamaman." "Yes, Your Highness, I understand completely." "Sayakun kama talabt. Ladha min al-tarikh ila tabak." "It will be as you asked, a taste of history on a plate." Without waiting for another word, she turned on her heel and walked back towards the kitchen, leaving a stunned sheikh, a terrified manager, and a silent dining room in her wake. The test had been set. Now she had to deliver the answer. The moment Mia burst through the kitchen doors, the atmosphere shifted from panicked paralysis to focused intensity. The staff, who had been listening with rapt attention, turned to her as one. "Shish barak," Mia announced, her voice ringing with an authority no one had ever heard from her before. "Marco, do we have ground lamb? Not the Australian rack, the ground shoulder. We need fresh yogurt, full fat, garlic, cilantro, pine nuts, and flour for the dough." Marco stared at her for a second. Then a slow grin spread across his face. He grabbed his cleaver and slammed it into his butcher block, the sound a ringing declaration of allegiance. "I've never made it in my life, but my ex-wife's grandmother was Lebanese. I've eaten it 100 times. I know the taste. Ground lamb we have. Yogurt, too. Let's do it, kid. Let's cook them some poetry." Julian stumbled in after her, his face ashen. "Are you insane?" he sputtered. "You're betting my career on lamb ravioli and sour milk? This is a disaster. I'm calling it off. We'll comp his meal, apologize profusely." Mia spun on him, her blue eyes blazing with a cold fire he'd never seen. "You will do nothing, Julian. You will stand there, and you will stay out of our way. You have already proven you don't understand the man. Your currency is money. His is history, honor, and respect. I am speaking his language now. Let me work." Before Julian could retort, Marco pointed the tip of his massive chef's knife at him. "She's the boss right now, Croft. Go stand in the corner and try not to have an anxiety attack on my clean floor." For the next 30 minutes, the kitchen was a whirlwind of controlled, purposeful action. Mia wasn't a waitress. She was a general commanding her troops. She showed the pastry cook how to roll the dough, paper thin. "They have to be delicate, like a poet's words," she explained. She worked with Marco on the yogurt sauce, tasting it constantly. "It needs more garlic, but crushed, not minced, and a hint of mint, just a whisper of it." She toasted the pine nuts herself, watching them with an eagle eye until they were the perfect shade of golden brown. Julian paced by the door like a caged animal, wringing his hands. "He's been waiting for half an hour. No dish takes this long. He's going to think we're incompetent." "Let him wait," Mia said, without looking up from the simmering pot of yogurt. "He knows a dish like this cannot be rushed. It's not a steak you can just throw on a grill. This is an act of creation. He will appreciate the time we are taking." Finally, it was ready. The dish was presented in a simple, hand-thrown ceramic bowl. The pale, creamy yogurt was a canvas for the delicate dumplings, the vibrant green of the cilantro, and the glistening, jewel-like pine nuts. The aroma was intoxicating: savory lamb, tangy yogurt, sharp garlic, and the nutty fragrance of toasted butter. "It looks plain," Julian said, his voice trembling. "There's no height, there's no foam. Can't we put an orchid on it or something?" Mia picked up the silver tray. Her hands were perfectly steady. "Its beauty is in its honesty, Julian. That's the whole point." She took a deep breath, centered herself, and pushed back through the doors into the dining room. The silence that greeted her was absolute. The sheikh had not moved. He sat at the table, his hands resting in his lap, a portrait of immense patience. His entourage was equally still. Every other diner in the restaurant had stopped their own meals, their attention fixed on the unfolding drama. Maya approached the table with the grace and solemnity of a priestess performing a ritual. She placed the tray on the side stand and, with great care, set the bowl in front of the sheikh. She did not offer a flowery description. The dish would speak for itself. Sheikh Khalid looked down at the bowl. He did not move for a full minute, simply observing it. Then he closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, drawing the fragrance into his lungs. The tension in the room was so thick it was almost unbearable. Slowly the sheikh opened his eyes. There was a strange, unreadable emotion in them, something soft and vulnerable. He picked up his spoon. He dipped it into the bowl, collecting a single dumpling, a pool of the warm yogurt, and a few toasted pine nuts. He brought it to his lips and tasted it. He chewed once, twice, his eyes closed again. A single, profound stillness settled over him. He swallowed. Then he took another spoonful, and another. He ate with the focused intensity of a man who was not merely consuming food, but communing with a long-lost memory. Across the table, Tariq, the stoic head of security, caught Mia's eye and gave her a slow, deliberate nod of profound respect. Finally, the sheikh placed his spoon down beside the half-empty bowl. He looked up at Mia, and all the arrogance, all the imperious testing was gone from his face. It was replaced by a look of deep, undisguised curiosity. "Man alamak hada?" he asked, his voice soft, almost a whisper. Who taught you this? Mia's professional composure wavered for just a second. She thought of rainy afternoons in the university library, the smell of old paper, the thrill of deciphering a difficult text. She thought of the life she had lost. Darasat al-Tarikh, ya sahib al-sumu, she replied in Arabic, her voice equally quiet. I studied history, Your Highness. Karat e'an matabikh al-khulafa, lakin al-tabkh hadakan min al-qalb. I read about the kitchens of the caliphs, but the cooking, that came from the heart. The sheikh let out a low, genuine laugh. It was a warm, rich sound that seemed to chase the chill from the room. From the heart, indeed, he said, switching back to English for all to hear. My grandmother used to make this for my grandfather when he was a young man, a scholar with no money, only books. She used to say it was a dish to feed the mind as well as the belly. I have not tasted this flavor since I was a boy. He stood up, and the entire restaurant seemed to lean in, holding its breath. Mr. Croft, the sheikh called out. Julian, who had been trying to make himself invisible against a wall, scurried forward. Yes, Your Excellency, I am so pleased you enjoyed the dumplings. I told the chef to spare no expense. Stop, the sheikh said. The word was not loud, but it carried the absolute weight of command. Do not lie to me again. I know a liar when I see one. You thought this dish was peasant food. I saw the look on your face through the kitchen window. You wanted to garnish it with an orchid. Julian went bone white. I was only thinking of presentation. You were thinking of impressing me with meaningless decoration, the sheikh corrected him coldly. This woman, Amelia, she impressed me with substance. You have a treasure in your midst, Mr. Croft, and you have been using her to polish your silverware. The sheikh turned his full attention back to Mia. Amelia, you are a student of history? I was, Your Highness, Mia said. Why did you stop? He asked, his gaze direct and piercing. Mia hesitated. She glanced at Julian, who was now glaring at her with pure, unadulterated hatred. Then she thought of her grandmother, of the quiet dignity with which she faced her fading memories. She thought of the 5 years of grinding, soul-crushing work. Life intervened, Your Highness, she said, her voice clear and steady. My parents passed away, and my grandmother needed my care. Some things are more important than books. The sheikh nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. Duty, family, honor. These are the words my father built our house upon. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a familiar, thick document, bound in fine leather. He placed it on the table. Mr. Croft, the sheikh said, his voice turning to ice. The meal has convinced me. This place has a heart, buried though it may be. I am ready to sign the agreement. Julian's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He looked as if he had been granted a last-second pardon from the governor. Oh, thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you. You will not be disappointed. I am rarely disappointed, the sheikh said. However, as you know, my legal team is based in Riyadh. The contract is, of course, in standard legal Arabic. I trust your global standards will not find this to be an issue. Julian stared at the swirling, elegant script. It was completely indecipherable to him, but he saw the number on the front page, $50,000. That was all the language he needed to understand. Not at all, he stammered, fumbling for the gold pen in his pocket. A formality. I trust you implicitly. Wait, Mia said, her voice sharp. Julian froze, the pen hovering over the paper. He turned to her, his face a thundercloud. One more word out of you, Vance, and I swear. Daha tata kalam, the sheikh said, his voice laced with amusement. Let her speak. You have something to say, Amelia? Mia's eyes were locked on the document. Even upside down, she could read the heading and the first few lines of the preamble. Her heart began to pound. Mr. Croft, Mia said, her voice dangerously calm. Before you sign that, you should know that it is not an investment agreement. I don't need your advice, Julian snapped. I'm the manager. I'm closing this deal. He pressed the pen to the paper and scrawled his signature with a triumphant flourish. There, he beamed at the sheikh. To our new partnership. The sheikh did not smile. He picked up the contract, examined the signature, and then handed it not to Julian, but to Mia. Now, Amelia, the sheikh said, his voice resonating through the silent room. Please be so kind as to read Clause 3, Section A, to your former boss. The silence that followed the sheikh's command was a different beast entirely. It was not the silence of tension or fear, but of dawning, horrified comprehension. The air crackled with it. Julian's triumphant grin faltered, twitching at the corners of his mouth. Former boss? He echoed, a nervous laugh catching in his throat. Your Excellency has a very dry sense of humor, a classic negotiator's tactic. I admire it. The sheikh did not look at him. His gaze was fixed on Mia, his expression serene. Read it, Amelia, he repeated, his voice soft but implacable. Mia's hands were trembling slightly as she held the heavy document. She took a breath, her training in linguistics and textual analysis kicking in, pushing aside the fear. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the timid whisper of a waitress, but the clear, precise tone of an academic presenting a thesis. Clause 3, Section A, she began, translating the dense legal Arabic into crisp, damning English. By affixing his signature, the representative of the Pinnacle's management, herein identified as Mr. Julian Croft, voluntarily resigns his position, effective immediately, and transfers all managerial authority to a new appointee to be chosen at the sole discretion of Al Jamil Holdings. A collective gasp went through the staff members who were clustered by the kitchen door. Chloe, who had been watching from the sidelines, put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. Julian snatched the document from Mia's hands. He stared at the elegant, flowing script, as if he could, by sheer force of will, change its meaning. What? No, this is a boilerplate translation error, a mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Croft, the sheikh said, standing to his full height. He seemed to loom over Julian, a figure of immense and unassailable authority. I do not make mistakes of that magnitude. Mia's eyes scanned the next paragraph on the page she had already read. Her voice grew colder, harder. There's more. Section B. The signatory, Mr. Julian Croft, furthermore admits to and accepts full personal liability for the systematic embezzlement of the employee tip pool, totaling an estimated $180,000 over the past 24 months, as detailed in the forensic accounting report in Appendix Os What. The blood drained from Julian's face. He looked like a ghost in an expensive suit. Embezzlement? That's an outrageous lie. Slander, you have no proof. Oh, but we do, the sheikh said calmly. My investment team is thorough. We discovered the discrepancies weeks ago. We have sworn affidavits from 3 former employees you fired to silence them. The report is already on its way to the district attorney's office. I simply wanted to see if you were foolish enough to sign a confession. You set me up, Julian shrieked, his voice a high, strangled sound. He pointed a shaking finger at the sheikh, then at Mia. This was a trap. She was in on it. I gave you a test, the sheikh corrected him, his voice like chipping ice. A test of character. You failed at every turn. You lied about your restaurant's integrity. You lied about your staff's abilities. You showed contempt for my culture. And you bullied a woman who possessed more intelligence and honor in her little finger than you have in your entire being. You are not a manager, Mr. Croft. You are a parasite." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod over Julian's shoulder. Tariq, the silent head of security, stepped forward and placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. The hand was as large and as solid as a block of granite. "Mr. Croft," Tariq said, his voice a low rumble. "The Chicago Police Department is waiting for you in the lobby. They are very interested in discussing your accounting practices." "No!" Julian wailed, struggling futilely against Tariq's immovable grip. He looked wildly around the room, his eyes landing on the other staff members. "Don't listen to him. I was going to share the bonus with all of you. She's the one who ruined it. The little bookworm witch." "Take him away," the sheikh commanded, turning his back on the sputtering, defeated man. As Tariq dragged Julian towards the elevator, his expensive shoes scuffing on the marble he had been so obsessed with keeping pristine, a strange thing happened. From the kitchen, Chef Marco began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate applause. Then a young busboy joined in. Then Chloe, her face a mixture of shock and dawning relief. Soon the entire staff, and even some of the diners at nearby tables who had witnessed the whole affair, were applauding. It wasn't for the sheikh's victory. It was for Julian's downfall. The elevator doors chimed and closed, swallowing Julian Croft's final, pathetic protests. A profound silence fell over the room once more, but this time it was filled with relief and possibility. The sheikh turned to the assembled staff. "As of this moment, Al Jamil Holdings is the new owner of this establishment," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "All stolen tips will be repaid in full, with interest. Your salaries will be reviewed and adjusted to reflect your hard work. But my first official act is to appoint a new general manager." He looked directly at Mia, who was standing frozen, the signed confession still clutched in her hand. "I believe Chef Marco would be an excellent—" she began, bewildered. The sheikh cut her off with a gentle smile. "Marco is a brilliant artist, but his place is in the kitchen. I need a leader. I need someone who understands that the soul of a place is not in its decor, but in its people. Someone who values knowledge over ignorance and honor over profit. Someone who is not afraid to speak truth to power, whether that power belongs to a petty tyrant or a sheikh." He stepped towards her and extended his hand. "The position is yours, Amelia Vance. The salary will be more than sufficient to ensure the finest care for your grandmother for the rest of her life. That, I believe, is what you call a signing bonus." Mia stared at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. The world seemed to tilt and spin. Just hours ago, she had been invisible, a ghost polishing silver. Now she was being handed the keys to the kingdom. "How?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "How did you know about my grandmother?" "As I said, Amelia, my team is thorough," the sheikh replied, his eyes kind. "When I learned that a brilliant academic, a woman who gave up a promising career to care for her family, was being forced to scrub floors by a common thief, I became very interested. I did not come here tonight to buy a restaurant. I came here to see if you were the person my files suggested you were. You are more." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of overwhelming, shattering relief. The weight of 5 years of silent struggle, of sacrificing her dreams for her duty, seemed to lift from her shoulders. She looked at her own hands, the nails short, the skin chapped from cleaning solutions. Then she looked at the sheikh's hand, offered not as charity, but as a partnership. She wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and took his hand. The grip was firm, warm, and steady. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong, ringing with a confidence she thought she had lost forever. "Yes, Your Highness, I accept." "Excellent," the Sheikh said, releasing her hand. "Your first task as manager is to add shish barak to the permanent menu, and then, tomorrow, you will go out and buy yourself a suit that befits your new station. This establishment is now a place of substance, and it will be led by a woman of substance." 3 months later, the Pinnacle was unrecognizable. The cold, sterile opulence was gone, replaced by an atmosphere of warm, understated elegance. Soft Persian rugs now graced the marble floors, the lighting was softer, and the air was filled with the subtle scent of fresh jasmine and cardamom from the new tea service. The menu was a masterpiece, a collaboration between Marco's culinary artistry and Mia's historical knowledge. It was booked solid for 6 months. The private elevator chimed, and Mia stepped out. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal grey suit, her hair styled in soft waves that framed her face. The weary, downcast look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a bright, confident sparkle. She moved through the dining room, not with the hurried steps of a servant, but with the assured, graceful glide of a leader. "Good evening, Senator," she said, pausing at a table. "I trust the vintage I recommended is to your liking?" "It's exquisite, Amelia," the senator replied, beaming. "As is everything you've done with this place. It finally has a soul." As she reached the hostess stand, her personal phone buzzed. It was a text from an unsaved number, but she knew who it was from. Message: "I am visiting Eleanor at Oakwood Manor. She just beat me in a game of chess. She told me her granddaughter saved her. I told her it was the other way around. See you for dinner next week. Kay." Mia smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. She had moved her grandmother into the finest suite at the care home, and under the care of the best doctors, Eleanor was having more and more lucid days. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and looked out at the glittering Chicago skyline. 5 years ago, that view had been a symbol of a world she could see but never touch, a world she was forced to clean for others. Now, it was simply the backdrop to her life. She was no longer a ghost in the machine. She was the one who had rebuilt it, piece by piece, infusing it with history, honor, and a piece of her own resilient heart. And she was just getting started.